Well, good morning. It's good to see all of you today. I'll be like the fourth person to say I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I was told to lay off the Ohio State fans today, so I will do so. As a Purdue and Tennessee fan, I would just love the privilege of being sad about going 11-1. That's the only thing I'll say. I hope my son gets that opportunity being an Ohio boy. But yeah, it's good to see everyone. If you're visiting with us today, we are glad you're here. You're honored guests. We hope that you are blessed by God and come to know His love a little better from your time with us here this morning. We have been spending since early October, we've been working through the minor prophets. We've been doing a series on the minor prophets. And after a couple of weeks away from that series, we are finally going to get back on track this morning. Our goal here is, we have quite a few learned Christians here. We have some people who are new to the faith and are growing and are learning, but we have a lot of people who know their Bibles really well. And what I was hoping to do was find some deeply relatable truths, some really relatable quality content of things that we don't spend a lot of time in. My guess is if you have not just sat and reflected day in and day out on Obadiah, okay, or Haggai or Habakkuk, as many people probably haven't. But they're really quality stuff, and I hope that these lessons, they're helping shape your Christianity and your spiritual life. Obadiah is one of my favorites of this genre in the Old Testament. And because I like it so much, we're going to take the opportunity, and we are going to read Obadiah front to back today. Okay? I like it that much that I want you to hear the beginning to the end. It should only take us about 30 minutes, and then I'll talk for another 20, and it'll be good. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, you don't really want that. Actually, Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament. It's only 21 verses long. And so that's still more than I would actually usually read in a sermon in one setting. I don't think that makes for the most efficient preaching. But I really do think it's a neat opportunity for you and for us as a gathered church family, to open up a book of the Bible, open up an inspired piece of scripture that was written by an author, and read it from front to back. I really like that idea. And so while it might not be something I usually would do, I do want us to try that today. It shouldn't take 30 minutes. Obadiah, let's start in verse 1. It's 21 verses long. The vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. It's a nation. We have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, "Rise, let us go against her for battle. See, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? But how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasures pillaged. All of your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. In that day, declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, those of understanding in the mountains of Esau? Which Esau and Edom are kind of interchangeable if you haven't picked that up yet. Your warriors, Timon, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter. So far we have judgment, okay? This is the pronounced judgment that's coming on the people of Edom. Now we're going to shift to the why. This is the why. Verse 10, because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On the day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as they have never been. And now we're going to shift to a message of salvation and hope, okay? So we had the judgment, we had the reason for the judgment, and now we're kind of the last little bit here, shifting to a message of hope and salvation. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance. Jacob will be a fire, and Joseph a flame. Esau will be stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. People from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and people from the foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israelite exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath. The exiles from Jerusalem who are in the Sepharad will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. Okay, so there's a lot, and maybe it's a bit confusing to you, and maybe this is why you have not been reading the minor prophets a whole bunch, because that sounds like a bunch of really old, ancient stuff that does not make a lot of sense to you, and that's okay. This is a book where you're going to want some of the context and some of the background to help make sense of what's going on. And so as you can kind of see as we read through this, the whole book of Obadiah is one big condemnation on the people of Edom, on the Edomites. Now you might ask, who are the Edomites? Who are Edom? Well, Edom was a country that existed just to the south, a little bit southeast of the nation of Israel right here. Okay, and so, you know, they were a neighbor to Israel. Like a lot of people in the ancient worlds, they had some border skirmishes, fought back and forth on where one person's kingdom ended and another's began. But more important than that, Edom are the descendants of Esau, as you kind of saw as we were reading, right? You saw that those were interchangeable, and that's why. In the same way that Jacob became the father of Israel, his big brother Esau became the father of Edom. And because of that, there was actually a special relationship between Edom and Israel, okay? In fact, when the Israelites were coming up after their 40 years in the desert wanderings, after they were coming up from being slaves in Egypt and they were coming to the promised land, they came up this way and they crossed over at the Jordan River at the top. But as they were coming along this way, God tells them, and you can read about this in Deuteronomy and some of the other early Old Testament books, he says, hey, you don't attack Edom. You don't attack your brothers, in other words. Don't provoke them to attack you either. And if you take any of their food, if you take any of their water along the way, you pay for it, okay? Because I am taking care of them the same way I am taking care of you. I'm giving you this promised land up here, right? But I have given them their own promised land. This is a land that I have set aside for Edom because of who they are. Because they are the people of Abraham, and that was important to God. And so they had this kind of special relationship. So that's kind of who Edom was, and that's a little bit of the background there. But the reason that they're being condemned by God here in the book of Obadiah is because in the 6th century BC, and we've read a lot about these Assyrians and the Babylonians, right? Well, the Babylonians, they come from the north with their armies, and they are destroying Israel, they're destroying Judah, and they come and they destroy Jerusalem, they sack the town, they're killing people and committing all these awful atrocities and violences. And do you know what Judah's brother to the south did? What Edom did while they were being attacked, while they were being slaughtered in the streets, while the temple of God was being destroyed? They sat there and had a little party about it, okay? You saw the word gloat come up a lot when we read through it, didn't we? You know, verse 12 says that they gloated in the day of their misfortune, that they rejoiced in the destruction, that they boasted in Judah's trouble. And in verse 11 it says they stood aloof. You stood aloof in that day, and on that day you were like one of them. And I just get this image of a brother at school, a brother who is being bullied at school, right? He's getting harassed. He's maybe getting beat up. He's suffering and he's in pain, and it's awful. And just imagine that kid with his brother is not standing up for him, not defending him, but his older brother is standing there alongside the bully, laughing about it and gloating about it and enjoying it, right? You kind of see how that relationship would play out between these two nations. You know, Edom was supposed to be Israel's brother. These two nations were both blessed and used by God, and now Edom has sided with the Babylonians in their destruction of God's people. And one of the key messages, and there's quite a few, but one of the key messages, I think, to this story is the fact that there are no innocent bystanders, okay? There are no innocent bystanders. Edom did not tear down Jerusalem's walls, did they? Edom did not send their armies to fight against Israel and Judah's soldiers. They didn't do that. But here they are with a whole book of the Bible dedicated to condemning them because of what? Because they stood off to the side and let it happen, right? They stood off to the side and laughed about it, gloated about it, celebrated in the misfortune of other people. And in fact, not just in Obadiah. Obadiah is a whole book dedicated to it, but as I've been studying through Joel and Amos, each of these other minor prophets, they usually have a nice little chunk of a paragraph committed to bashing Edom because they have a grudge, okay? And this is a grudge that we read about through extra-biblical. If you read other Jewish writings from this time and later on, they are mad at their brothers to the south for not standing up for them back in that day, right? And you see, the point here is we don't always have to be the evildoers to be in the wrong, do we? Hear that? We don't always have to be the evildoers to be in the wrong. Sitting there and doing nothing while evil abounds is its own sin, okay? I know some of you are logging out because of all the context in the background. Some of you love it. Some of you are bored to tears. That's okay. But pulling you back in, doing nothing while evil abounds is its own sin. Even more so if we revel in it, like Edom did, gloating or rejoicing over someone else's suffering. But that shouldn't be like news to us, right? That's not just a singular lesson from Obadiah. I mean, every kid's movie out there has some kind of protagonist who stands up for someone who is hurting, even though they didn't have to, right? Like every other Disney movie out there, you stand up for the weak person who's being beat down, even though you didn't have to. Even if the hero is not strong enough to defeat that evil by themselves, you have this sense that to do what is right is to stand up against that, to stand up for righteousness. And it's a lesson in the New Testament as well, that there are no innocent bystanders. Matthew 25, you'll remember this as it's like, well, you saw me hungry and you gave me something to eat. Everything you did to the least of these, you did to me, right? In this story, in the second half of that, the people who are cast away into eternal fire, they're not the ones who made them starve. It's not the ones who imprisoned them. It's not the one who stripped them of their clothes. It's the people who saw the hungry and didn't feed them. It's the people who saw the imprisoned and didn't visit them. It's the people who saw the naked and didn't clothe them. It was the people who just stood by and said, it's not my problem. That's the people who are told to depart, right? Or Luke 10, the story of the Good Samaritan, the antithesis to the Good Samaritan, to the Christian neighbor. It's not so much the robbers in the story who beat up the man. It's not the thugs. The antithesis to the Good Samaritan is the nice religious folk, right? The priest and the Levite who just walk by on the other side, who decide, it's not my problem, I'm just going to keep my distance, right? That's who's not following Jesus. Do you see that? Do you see what I'm saying here? Non-action, it doesn't fly with God. Non-action doesn't fly with God. We can't be a bystander to evil. And I think that's a difficult message for us, especially in a world where where it's so easy and so convenient to not get our hands involved, not get our hands dirty. But that is the message of Obadiah, right? And I think it's important to ask ourselves with this, what is it that causes such uncompassionate behavior? What is the driving force behind the Edomites that they would laugh at the Judeans who were slaughtered in the streets? What is it that drives any of us to not help and to stand aside and gloat while another is in pain? Well, I think Obadiah gives us the answer to that as well. He talks about it with the Edomites, especially those first couple verses, but just looking at verse 3 and 4. The pride of your heart has deceived you, he says. You who live in the clefts of the rock and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like the eagles, and God doesn't deny that, and you make your nests among the stars, I will bring you down, says God, right? It's the pride. The pride is, I think pride is one of the trickiest things that we deal with today. We want to have pride in this or that, right? To an extent, we want to have pride in our families or certain things, but being filled with pride, being prideful, it leads us to a dangerous place, okay? It is a vice. There's a way to use it in a way that kind of just means more admiration, and then there's a way that it is a vice. As Obadiah mentions, the Edomites, they lived in these mountain ranges, okay? These mountain ranges that were almost impenetrable by ancient armies. Indiana Jones fans? Yes? Lots of head nods for Indiana Jones. There we go. Yeah. Old ones, not the new ones. Okay? You'll remember this place. I think it's this one, not that one. This one doesn't actually hold the Holy Grail inside, apparently. This was a temple, and I think this one was a treasury. And these are two of just a handful of structures that were built into the mountains at a place called Petra, which means rock, right? You kind of get where they got that. Do you know where this is located? In ancient Edom. These were Edomite cities. You can understand then why they would have a bit of pride, okay? Not only did they have the beautiful design and architecture, which you can actually see in other architectural works from their day and age, but if an army is coming against them with horses, swords, and spears, you can hold off the Roman army with a place like that, right? You just got to go inside, put 6 men at the doorway, and you can hold off an army. You can understand why they'd have that pride, why they would feel so untouchable, why they would have such arrogance. You know, they thought of themselves as eagles or stars in the sky that couldn't be touched by mortals below, like Israel or Babylon. And I think it is that pride that leads them to a point where they could see other people suffer and have zero care in the world. Okay? Pride leads to overconfidence. Overconfidence leads to arrogance. Arrogance leads to self-absorption. And self-absorption lacks any compassion for anybody else, right? You know, when you think that you are all that matters, when you think that you deserve special status, when you think that you can't be touched, you will end up walking in the path of Satan instead of the path of God, right? Just think about that. You know, you will more closely resemble the angel that thought he deserved to be God, i.e. Satan, than the God who thought it was worthwhile to make himself a lowly carpenter. Okay, I'll say that again. If we live in a way of pride, we will find ourselves resembling more the angel that thought he deserved to be God than the God who decided he should become a humble carpenter, right? You know, that's what pride is. And maybe you think those are awfully strong words for something as simple or as low-key as pride, but I think it's true. I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan, more than just Narnia, which is great, okay? Everyone thinks of C.S. Lewis for Narnia. We forget that he was like an Oxford philosophy professor. He had this great little writing on pride for Mere Christianity. It's a really popular work from around the World War II era. He writes, "Pride is the center of Christian ethics. According to Christian teachers, and I would say the Bible, the essential vice, the utmost evil is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that, they're mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil." We kind of said that a second ago. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. Okay? It led the Edomites to cheer on the ruin of their brother. But here's the thing about pride, and especially about Edom and their situation. It only started with gloating and cheering. That's how it began. It started with cheering and gloating and rejoicing over someone else's pain. Before too long, maybe after the battle had ended, maybe after it was clear that the Babylonians had won and that Judah was destroyed, after a certain time, the Edomites, they decided to come down from their lofty mountain fortresses. They decided to exit those things and become a participant in Israel's pain. They started joining in with the Babylonians on taking the wealth and taking the plunder and looting Jerusalem. Right? We read about that. Maybe you remember that there in Obadiah. He talks about that. And they were doing it without a concern in the world. And one of the last things that Obadiah, and actually other historical accounts like Josephus and others, the last thing they tell us is on top of the watching and gloating that then led to the participating and looting, it finally ended with the Edomites standing on the boundary markers of Israel, catching the escapees, catching the survivors, and either killing them or handing them back over to the Babylonians to become slaves. Okay? All it started with was witnessing and laughing and gloating and letting sin reign over there. And by the end of it, they had their hands covered with the blood of God's people as well. Do you see that? It's one thing to feel pride over someone, to say, yeah, I'm better than them, look at them, to laugh about it. But pride very rarely ends that way because it's not enough. We're not satisfied with it, okay? By the end of it, we feel the need to exercise that superiority over someone else, to express that pride, to make it real. We might already feel it, but I want to see it. I want to touch it. I want to be better than them. So it started with them saying, look at those Israelites, defeated, being killed down there. But the next thing you know, it's like, well, let's go take their money too. Let's go kill their people too. Sin always seems to have a way of amplifying itself, doesn't it? It does. There's never really any casual relationship with sin. Once we give it an inch, sin continues to take and take and take. It's this beast that forces us to progress deeper and deeper into the darkness. Haven't you seen that in your life? I've seen it in my life. We see it all the time in the news. It starts with a little association with sin, and then a little encouragement of that sin, then light participation, and the next thing you know, you are knees deep in these horrible sinful actions that you never thought you'd find yourself in. You know, the Edomites that began just by watching and cheering, but before long they were looting and they were killing and they were handing over God's people to be enslaved. We cannot give sin an inch. We cannot fall into this trap that, hey, we can be innocent bystanders beside the sin, alongside the sin, or else we will eventually find ourselves partners with those who want to see beauty and justice undone. That's what it comes down to. We cannot be bystanders alongside sin, or we will find ourselves becoming partners in the sin. And that is a strong message here from Obadiah. But like so many of the other minor prophets, this oracle, as we've read, it doesn't end with a message of condemnation, okay? A large part of it is about what's going to happen to Obadiah, how they're going to be punished, what they're going to reap because of their actions. But that's not the final word. That's not the word that God leaves them on. The final word from God in the book of Obadiah is of salvation and renewal. God promises, He promises that justice will be brought on evil. God promises that He will protect His people, that there will be a remnant throughout this season of persecution that survives, that they will not be fully defeated. The God of the Bible is all about giving hope, especially to the survivors, right? He's a God of the survivors. He's a God of hope. Now, none of us here have really had to endure the kind of tragedies that Jerusalem experienced in this day and age. At least most of us haven't. Maybe some of you have stories I don't know about. But as was it Andy or Rich was talking about, it doesn't take that long to experience those things. Right? We have friends who have lived this story, right? In fact, this is why we are so involved in the refugee community right outside our doors that exists here in a couple-mile radius of our building. We're involved with those refugees because they have witnessed this. They have seen it. We're inspired by biblical passages like Obadiah that show us that we've got to step up for these people in suffering. In fact, if you were going to develop a theology of refugees, Obadiah is the place to start. But with that aside, though you and I haven't had to exactly face those same things, many of you here are survivors in other ways. Okay? You might not have had to face war, but you've survived things. There's been hardship in your life. You've seen trauma. You've been hurt. You've faced hardship. And you've survived. And I think this word is for you. It's for you. It's a message for you to hear that God will make things right. That the evil that was done will not go unnoticed by God, will not go unpunished. And that you will not be completely defeated, but you will be lifted up. That's the message of Obadiah. So whether you're the bystander or you're the survivor, there's a message for both here. And I really love the way this book ends, verse 21. Deliverers, some will say saviors. It's interesting. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. There are two groups of people here, right? Two groups of people. Mount Zion and Mount Esau. Israel and Edom. Jacob and Esau. right? Both of them are represented in God's final kingdom. There is hope. There is an invitation for both the bystander, the guilty party, and the survivor, the innocent party. Okay? God desires for both to be saved and to be redeemed. Yeah. Edom isn't condemned forever. Israel isn't going to suffer forever. Forgiveness and salvation is coming. And that's the gospel message, right? And it's our invitation this morning. Whether you have been the victim and you have struggled through life and you've been trying to survive this broken world and you're looking for a force to lift you out of that, to give you something to live for, or maybe you've been the guilty party. Maybe you've been the one letting evil reign in this world and you've decided that you're not going to fight on that side anymore. I want you to know that God loves you, that God has a home for you, and that there is an invitation to join His kingdom today. We invite you to do that now. You need only to come forward in faith as we stand and as we sing.